Okay. So once again, now we are up to our session number 3, entitled For, By, and About Us, Research for Women. Just as way of introduction, my name is Heather Behanna. I am part of the steering committee for this event. And my background, I am a chemist by training, but I actually do not work at the bench anymore. After doing some drug discovery research, I'm now a biotech analyst for a securities company, so technically Wall Street, even though it's LaSalle Street, but you know, details. So we'd like to get started with a poll question for this afternoon's session. And the question is, where do we see women in innovation? So we're going to start the poll. You guys know the rules. So just, the numbers should pop up in a moment. There we go. So get your minds focused again a little bit after your stomachs got filled at lunch. There we go. All right, I know people are texting. I can see it, so we'll wait for them to hit the screen for another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Okay. This should be an interesting session, especially there seems to be some conflict, some people weighing in on each side of this issue, so that's always a fun place to start when we've got confrontation and confusion. It's always makes for a more interesting session. Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity while the answers are rolling in to introduce our first speaker of session number 3, and then is Melissa Gilliam, who is a professor of obstetrics. OBGYN, we're just going to do that because it's easier. And Pediatrics at the University of Chicago, Chief of Family Planning, and Associate Dean for Diversity, Division of Biological Sciences. So please help me welcome Dr. Gilliam.
Good afternoon. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. My understanding is that this afternoon's conversation is about sort of the mixture between the science that we do and the careers that we lead. And so today I'll talk to you a little bit about how I've interwoven those two things, my research and kind of the choices that I've made. It has not been at all a linear process. If you had asked me when I was starting medical school, I would have said that I was going to be an oncologist. If you had asked me when I finished, I would have been heading towards surgical oncology. And then many years later, I am a pediatric and adolescent gynecologist and have a degree in public health and have not been in a basic science lab since quite a long time. So a very nonlinear progression. But what I'll talk about today is what it means to create a career in reproductive health and some of the choices and decisions I've made, and how I ended up kind of doing what I am doing now. So these are the issues that drive me. Two things. One is the high rate of pregnancies among adolescents, and the other is the high rate of sexually transmitted infections among adolescents. But I also think instead of just focusing on young people as a disease state, it's really important to sort of think about all of the different factors that influence their lives. So I often sort of think about it like, sort of a set of Russian dolls where in the middle you have sort of the biologic factors and the individual, and then you have the social and the behavioral. And these kind of frameworks and these frameworks for thinking of it has been very helpful for me because part of my time I'm in a clinical setting working with children, adolescents, and young adults, and other times I'm in a research setting, and these frameworks can be really good guideposts. But I think ultimately what my work is about is not really thinking just about young people and the diseases or the problems or high-risk behavior, but really thinking about this trajectory of how people go from early childhood through to adulthood. So my earliest work kind of focused on this. I was a resident here at Northwestern, and this was after I left general surgery and kind of came to obstetrics and gynecology. I was a resident here at Northwestern, and I had a number of occasions I would deliver babies to 13 and 14-year-old girls. And they were girls, so 13 and 14-year-old girls. And I started to say, you know, this is terrible. I mean, it's really, really sad for these children. And I think the kind of quintessential moment was delivering a baby and the grandmother saying, what a great 29th birthday present for me. And I thought, oh, I'm 29 as well. And sort of thinking, wow, look at the difference in our life trajectories. And so I began to really think that this idea of adolescent pregnancy and also kind of rapid repeat pregnancy. We do very well in general. This is kind of an overstatement, but many adolescent mothers do well because we can create social support for them. By the time adolescents have a second pregnancy, the chance of doing well is actually much more difficult. And there are really even additional consequences for children that are born in close succession to one another, from the biologic to the social. So this is sort of a diagram of one of my earliest studies where I said, you know, we sit in the clinical setting, and so much is happening in the lives of young people that I never really address or know about. And it wasn't until I started following young people and looking at all of these different systems from the social to the community to their interpersonal that I really began to understand the complexity of lives of adolescent mothers, but also the complexity of human lives that really impact how we practice clinical medicine that we're often just unaware of. We say, well, why didn't they take their medicine? And then when you actually follow patients, you start to understand taking medicine when there are issues of paying for it and finding a convenient place to go and taking care of your kids and all of these other things are complex factors. And so I started to realize I needed many more complex frameworks to guide my research. In 2005, I left. I was then at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I left and went to the University of Chicago, where I was asked to start my own section, my own division of family planning. And I sort of, and you'll see a common theme here, is someone's like, hey, you want to head something? I'm like, yep, sure, I'll do that. So I was like, sure, I'll do this. But what I wanted to do was really start to crystallize what I had, sort of my hypothesis, which was that you could make more effective interventions if you really go from your clinical insights to thinking about how it interacts with other fields and other disciplines. And so I actually went, and I'm in the middle of a clinical department, but I started a number of clinical programs, and I paired them with a research program, but also with education, because the thought of having many learners participate in the work that we do seemed really exciting. And then I approached one of our local foundations and I said, why not start a policy program? Wouldn't it be great if we took what we're learning in a clinical setting about sexual and reproductive health and thought about the policy implications and really thought about communicating with policymakers, educators, the public about these findings? And so that's been my section that I've run for the past 5 years. We've really had quite a diverse range of research. Some has been very clinical. This is a study that we've done looking at the two modern IUDs in adolescents, but really in particular looking at a population that people had often thought you shouldn't use them in: low income, adolescents of color at risk for sexually transmitted infections. And people said, well, you know, young people or people at risk for STDs can't use IUDs, but there's certainly absolutely no clinical evidence that that was true. And so by studying it, we're really able to show that they had excellent pregnancy prevention, very high rates of satisfaction. But again, sort of driven by this question that I had, which is how do you keep young adolescents from getting pregnant? These studies also were more, this is a pharmacokinetic study that we did, again, looking at this idea of unintended pregnancy and looking at the effect of obesity on how a particular contraceptive, this one is the contraceptive implant, how it affects the pharmacodynamics of when it's used by women who are obese. And so just the punchline is that they have much lower serum levels than non-obese women. But again, a lot of my research has been driven by the question, why do women have unintended pregnancy? What are the factors that contribute to it, regardless of whether it's a behavioral factor or a biologic factor? The policy program that we created was a way of starting to think about research that was based on pressing issues. And so for me, I've developed a program where you take policy issues, like teen pregnancy, and think about what research I might need to do in order to improve those policy issues. I did learn a lot of qualitative research. I'd always been trained in epidemiology and biostatistics, and suddenly I realized I actually need to have better skills in understanding young people and young adults, and to be able to take those lessons learned and apply them to research. So I had to get a new set of skills, but I was able to create often research where through interviewing and talking to young people who are affected by policy, we were able to translate that into research. The other thing that we did was to partner with the local and national advocacy community and organizations, really thinking about people who could communicate findings very well, and really working with them who often have barriers to the academic community and the academic literature, and really thinking about how we could take what we were learning in academia and use it to influence policymakers. So we created research briefs, policy briefs, fact sheets. And a lot of this I learned by sitting on the board of a nonprofit organization. So I kind of took what I learned working with a think tank and sort of said, that has so many relevant lessons for academia. So in about 2009, by this time I had a very busy research portfolio. Our group has 4 or 5 researchers, people in the policy program, a number of faculty members, so we were really busy. I began to think, well, what would happen if instead of the times that I kind of hit up against either a methodologic or a disciplinary silo, what if I kind of overcame those bridges by partnering with people who have deep expertise in that area? And in the past, I would have said, oh, well, you have to kind of learn those skills and go take a class yourself. But what I realized is that if you kind of become kind of a 5-minute expert, read up, learn some of the tools, have a credible conversation with the people in another discipline, you can start to discover where the interface between your work and their work might be. So I kind of took this idea and put it on steroids. These are all the people kind of around the campus, the University of Chicago, that I began to reach out to, talk to. I was in the law school, I was in the business school, I was in basic science labs. But by looking and really seeing what people were doing, even if it was directly or loosely linked, just getting some idea of what they were doing and having face-to-face conversations with them, we were really able to see these great areas of overlap between our research, either methodologically or interest-wise. And so I created this big network. We have this very exciting thing for me at the university called the Rara Initiative. And this sort of sums it up. What they do is they try to help faculty, talented or not, but faculty, have the resources they need to successfully lead interdisciplinary teams. In a nutshell, the idea was, we'll help you with the politics so you can focus on your ideas. We'll help you figure out how to navigate your way through campus so you can really take your idea and move it forward. And so I think some of the operative words here, like catalyze, large scale, the sort of idea of sort of saying, okay, we're going to really solve major problems in the reproductive health of women and children, wasn't really a problem. And when I said, I don't want this in the medical school, I don't want it in the medical center, I want it all the way across the campus, they said, okay. So in 2011, I hosted a day-long conference with people from all over campus. I think there were about 100 people. And when and this was something that I came up with the folks from Arate just to say, what do you think the next step is? I have this huge array of people. What's the next step to move this forward? What should I do with all of these connections? And we came up with this idea. They told me afterwards, they said, when we put that idea in front of you, we were talking about maybe 30 people. And I was like, oh. Okay, well, they're like, it's fine, 100, 30, 100, no problem. Just do what you want to go with it. But it was an amazing day. And what we found out was there were people who were working on things very closely related to my ideas. And so the other piece that happened, I think Heather mentioned it when she introduced me, was that I also took a position as an associate dean. And I tell you about this because it's sort of one of those juggling moments. Do you take on so much more, or are there advantages? Are there things that you can leverage? The job description wasn't even formed. It was like, oh, well, we'll figure it out once you do it because we've never actually done this before. But what I found was it gave me the leverage to put my other project forward. I suddenly had an opportunity to speak to the dean on a regular basis, the dean of the medical school on a regular basis, and many more people returned my phone calls. So I think there were really some opportunities there. And so this fall, I'll launch a center. It's called CI3, really focusing on interdisciplinary inquiry and innovation in sexual and reproductive health. And the idea is to bring uncommon partners together to find solutions to common problems. And it's really framed by this idea that we can really think across the life course from fetal development through to adulthood and then across to the next generation. It'll be framed by, one of the things that we did was to not only think about the ideas, but just to get to work. So we've been working really hard on a number of projects. And I want to just show you just briefly how far some of these projects have gone. This is one of my favorite projects. So this is a project that we're doing with young people using social media to start to rethink how we teach sexuality education. And so it focuses, these are the people. The second person here is from the English department. So now, one of my favorite collaborations is working in the English department. And we have storytellers and game designers and economists on the team. So it's really fun. And we're working on mentoring and creating with youth and playing games. So I think there are kind of a number of basic themes to what my work and sort of my work to date entail. One is really working from a mission. When you go and you approach people, and it's not about do research because you're going to help my career, but do research because you can help young people and help young and low-income youth living south side of Chicago. We're doing some work abroad as well. So I think that can be a very compelling idea. I think the next is really thinking about the interactions between all of the things that we do and bring to the table. And then the third is really making certain that you have an infrastructure so that you can sustain an ambitious program. It's allowed for a number of methodologic approaches, really allowed for a lot of innovation because we're working across disciplines. So I always thank the people who make it all possible, and thank you for listening. Oh, do we start with questions?
Great. Well, then I have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker. And I think at this session, we'll hold the questions till the end, and then we'll have the panel. So if you've got the questions, keep them in, write that down for later, okay? You'll go first, I gotcha. Our next speaker is Pauline Maki, the professor of psychiatry and psychology, the director of women's mental health research at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So Dr. Maki.
It's on. Okay, sorry. There is a sex difference in this visuospatial ability. It's 3/4 of a standard deviation. It is very large. I'm going to show you these data. These are from a Baltimore longitudinal study of aging. Men and women of different ages perform this task every 2 years. Now, what I will point you to is that the youngest age group were people in their 50s, and women caught up to men. Just by pure exposure, not by training, they caught up to men. So young brains catch up, not a problem. If you wait until you're 80 to be exposed to that type of problem, it could be an issue. Why is this relevant? I do neuroimaging research. This is a 3-dimensional mental rotation. I need to visualize how the sagittal, coronal, and axial view of the brain point to the brain region that's lit up when my brain is on estrogen. And I've had neurologists tell me that they got these superb MCAT scores, but then when they went to neurology school and they had to look at some brain scans, they had a really hard time putting them together. And I said, well, that makes sense, because you have this going on in your brain, and there's a male advantage, but you'll remember your textbooks better. So it all evens out. Now, some of the evidence that these skills are, in fact, dependent on sex steroid hormones comes from menstrual cycle studies. So we bring women into our labs, and we study them when their sex steroid hormone levels are low, 2 to 4 days after they've started bleeding, and then on days 20 to 22 of their menstrual cycle, when their estrogen and progesterone levels are higher. So same woman, different hormonal states. Low sex steroid hormones, high sex steroid hormones. What changes is sexually dimorphic cognitive abilities. So, we talked about this over lunch. Women have better fine motor skills than men. And when I was in graduate school in my behavioral genetics course, the professor had the gall, while I was in the audience, to say, well, what that means, the female advantage in fine motor skills means that she's going to be better at needlepoint. And I said, you mean neurosurgery, right, Dr. Bouchard, right? So, but there's a female advantage in this, and it's not due to finger size. They've studied it. That's not it. It's a female advantage. That fluctuates across the menstrual cycle. The more estrogen you have, the better you are at it. Now, at the same time that a woman has this advantage in her fine motor skills because her estrogen levels are high, her visual spatial skills are the worst. Her ability to mentally rotate that figure are the worst. And conversely, when her motor skills are the best, her visual spatial skills when her motor skills are the worst, her visual spatial skills are the best. And both of these correlate with estrogen levels. Another thing is, in the lab, we stress women out. We pay them for the privilege of stressing them out, but we stress them out because we like to measure stress hormones in women. We have them produce stress hormones by saying that they are going to have to give a public speech in 5 minutes. It's just kind of similar to what I'm doing right now. Men get very stressed when you look at their stress hormones. So if you look at the cortisol levels in their saliva or their blood, they have a higher response than women. Now, this is only to what we call social evaluative threat. So females are protected against stress hormone rises when you put them into a stressful situation. We have data from our lab showing that when women are most female-like, when their sex steroid levels are high, they don't show those stress responses. They're much less. So your ability to deal with social evaluative threat depends on where you are in your menstrual cycle. Now, relevant for what we do, when women had these social stressors and they weren't protected by high levels of estrogen, their memory was impaired after the stressor. Now, are our lives stressful? Our lives are very stressful, and our ability to maintain our cognitive functions in the presence of these stressors, our work has shown, is impaired if we have these cortisol surges days 2 to 4 of your menstrual cycle. But hey, if you got a lot of estrogen around, bring on the stress. Our memories are going to be fine. Okay, now the biggie. The thing I'm looking down the window of in a very ironic way. So, menopausal symptoms, especially hot flashes, they increase during the perimenopause. They reach the highest peak during the first 2 years of the postmenopause, ages 51 to 53, and then they decline over time. There are 8 to 10% of women who have hot flashes for the rest of their lives. Now, for working women, the timing of their hot flashes and their menopausal symptoms occur when? When their careers peak. So according to a 2010 report from the U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, women reach their career peak, as measured by peak salary, between ages 55 and 64. So right when you're in that area, biology serves you up a few hot flashes. So here I am transitioning in my full professor role, taking on these university-wide positions. Do menopausal symptoms impact our work? Well, you couldn't have published this 10 years ago. It wasn't politically correct, which is interesting. But there are studies that show that the number of menopausal symptoms that women report do, in fact, correlate with their work quality that they report. And it explains 33% of the variance. Is that right, 33%? Yeah, 33.8% of the variance. Not bad verbal memory. And so there is this relationship between being midlife and how many menopausal symptoms a woman reports. Now, what else happens in menopause? You have hot flashes so you don't sleep, and there are mood issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the mood issues. So these are data from, I think, 1,300 women across the nation, replicating what 5 previous studies have shown, which is there is a significant increase in clinically significant depressive symptoms when women enter the perimenopause. The large majority of women will not experience this, but it's real. Very much the way that PMS is very real for some of your friends, right? But the fact that all women don't experience wicked PMS doesn't make us doubt that PMS is hormonally related. So perimenopause and depressive symptoms are linked. And when we have depressive symptoms, our ability to complete effortful cognitive tasks is limited. We finally have a study that documents that, in fact, there are cognitive changes objectively measurable as women transition through the menopause. The good news is that these problems seem to be highest when women are transitioning, and then women get better. So they're temporary. Something's going on in the menopausal transition that contributes to these memory deficits. Your ability to remember what I'm saying right now and your advantage in verbal memory over men is mediated in part by the fact that you have, at least if you're under 50, a supercharged hippocampus. So right now your hippocampus is really active. And it'll stay active except when women transition through the menopause around age 50. This advantage that they show early decreases. Men don't show this age-related change in their hippocampus. So we think that there's something that's going on here that contributes to poor performance on memory tests and other tests that require good hippocampal functioning. One of those things is hot flashes. So we have our RAs measure hot flashes objectively. That doesn't mean that I'd sit in front of you and watch to see if you were sweating. What it means is that we have women wear these monitors. They measure changes in skin conductance. If you were to swallow a radiotelemetry pill that measured core body temperature, the correlation between that core body temperature and the changes on the skin is 0.99, so that validates the method. Far from being hypochondriacal, ladies, we underreport our hot flashes by about 40%. That's true during the day and during the night, so overall, we are not complainers. Much to my husband's surprise. So, what's interesting is that we think previous studies have missed a relationship between hot flashes, which are the key menopausal symptom, and cognitive dysfunction because they've asked ladies, how many hot flashes are you having? And women can't tell you how many hot flashes they're having. They're not very good at it because they're non-hypochondriacal. When we measure these hot flashes objectively with our monitors, we find a significant and negative relationship with memory functioning. When we asked these same women, are you having a hot flash? There was not a significant relationship. So menopausal symptoms, we think, have a direct effect on brain systems that observe memory function. And in fact, we have neuroimaging data that I won't show today that supports that. Oh, actually, I will show it today. So this is your brain, your prefrontal cortex, on an objective hot flash. Correlation of 0.76 for orbital frontal prefrontal and 0.7 for dorsolateral. All that means is that there's a correlation between your brain functioning in objective hot flashes and none between the hot flashes that you think you have. So what does that mean? It is not all in your head. If it was, this correlation would be significant, and this one wouldn't. This is all in your body. This is all sex steroid hormones, we think. Finally, I will say that there are implications for having sex differences in cortisol. Women, as they age, if they experience stressors, have a decrease in memory performance in relation to cortisol. Men do not. What does that mean? Means that as they age, women seem to be 3 times more vulnerable to stress than men. So we are investigating right now in 3 different projects the impact of the menopausal transition on women's ability to handle stressors. So basically, we take flashing women and bring them into the lab and make them give a public speech. You know, it's kind of what we do best. But we're studying whether or not they handle those stressors as well as premenopausal women and as postmenopausal women. Because if this is true, then there might be things that women can do to maintain their responses to stress so that they don't have these cortisol surges as they age and their memory doesn't consequently suffer. So those are the 3 different areas of research that I've brought over to you today. There are sex differences in brain function. Read Larry Cahill. Your cognitive abilities do change across the menstrual cycle, and your ability to handle stress changes across the menstrual cycle, and those 2 things are related. Those hormonal fluctuations across the menstrual phase are recapitulated when you transition through the perimenopause. It's much worse, lasts much longer. You don't get a break 26 days out of the month. But the key word here, though, is individual differences. Some women will fly through menopause and not even know it. Other women have a much tougher time. But if a woman thinks that she's experiencing cognitive changes in the menopause, we've just published an article that was picked up everywhere for some reason, showing that women are very good judges of how well their brain is functioning. So if you think your brain's functioning well, take heart, it probably is. On the other hand, if you think your brain's not functioning very well like I do, don't take heart, it probably isn't. So that's the life of a scientist who studies estrogen in the brain. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And once again, we're going to hold questions till the end. So keep them in your minds for the end of the session as I get the opportunity to introduce our final speaker for session number 3. Romila Singh, Associate Professor, Lubar School of Business and Associate Director of the Center for the Study of the Workplace, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So we will have Dr. Singh up in one moment.
Thank you very much can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. This has been a terrific opportunity to add to the conversations that we have been having for over a day and a half, and it's been such an inspiring time learning from you and hearing some really cool, outstanding ideas. So I've tried to weave in the big ideas and big impact theme throughout, and I had to kind of stop myself, and this is where I went back and forth with Rabia and with the other folks in terms of not making it cynical and sound like, well, this is an old idea. So if you do feel that it's not really a new idea, but it's a big idea, it's an old idea, do bring that up, because some of them may not be new ideas, but they're certainly powerful ideas. So let me just give you, I forget this is not a clicker. A quick overview of what I'd like to talk about. This is based on the results of a study that we have done. My colleague Nadia Fouad, who's an educational psychologist, and I am a social scientist, a behavioral scientist, and so we represent the other type of sciences, the behavioral and social sciences, not quite the sciences that you've been hearing about. But both of us do come from STEM families. Her dad is an engineer, was a professor of engineering, and both my parents were engineers. I'm married to a tech person kind of thing. And my brother is a scientist. He's a real scientist in the family, my brother is. So we come from a family of STEM folks. So we like to talk about some of those issues that are that resonate with both men and women. The findings of our study are on women engineers, a very specific subset of STEM. And the reason we chose engineers, not scientists, not mathematicians, not any other folks, is because engineers kind of subsume some of those things, but nobody really has studied, well, I should just kind of be careful about that. Very few people have studied engineers systematically and in this kind of a comprehensive manner that we've decided to go about studying them. And the reason for focusing on engineers is because they represent so-called the last bastion of male chauvinism. And these are not my words, but the words of another researcher who looked at engineering as really being the last bastion of male chauvinism. So we decided to focus on that because as what we found out was that we really did not know much about engineering. We know that people leave, and specifically women leave, but their rate of departure is so much more compared to men. And we went about trying to understand what was the reasons beyond some of the common reasons that have been bandied about in the media in terms of women leave because they want to have babies or they cannot juggle home and family. Some of the themes that you may have heard about how other successful scientists have managed their life and career trajectories today and yesterday's keynote speaker. So we wanted to do a deep dive and figure out over the life course what was going on that accounts for these differences between men and women. And we do not know why women leave, and that's the reason why we're taking on the study. And most importantly, when do they leave? And I'll save this for the last, because if I give you the bottom line right now, then you just kind of tune out. But it's very fascinating to know when they leave, and it's a pattern that we have seen happening over and over again. With this idea in mind, what we did was to approach National Science Foundation with this very grand proposal, and lo and behold, they actually bought what we had in mind, and they funded us for 3 years, and what I'm reporting here is the first set of data that has come in. Actually, we cut off the, for the purposes of doing the report for NSF, we cut off the data collection in January, but since then, we've gotten over 5,500 responses. And I'll come back to the slide in a minute. But I'd like to just, as I'm talking about what was in the previous slide, take a look at the universities here. We reached out to, these are the 30 who formally partnered with us. But we reached out to many, many universities across the country, and they represent the best and the brightest that this country has to offer. The top engineering programs in the country, the top 10, the big 10 are all here. And there's a reason for spending time talking about this backdrop, because these are the women who have entered engineering or may not have entered engineering and are leaving. What's going on? Why are we losing these talented engineers? And at what time are we losing them? So what we did was we sent out invites to women through the alumni offices, women engineers who had graduated 2009 all the way back till I think our first graduate was from the early 60s. We have over 6 decades of graduates represented in our sample. And as women were getting these invites to participate in our study, what was going on was that they went ahead and started sending out the link to our study to other folks as well. And we started getting a barrage of emails saying, hey, how come my colleague got it and I didn't? We had a situation where a mother emailed us saying, how come my daughter got invited to the study and I didn't? I'm also a woman engineer. How are we forgetting the ones who have made the difference? Why are you being so biased? And we said, well, it's just the university that we partnered with. And then after a while, we decided to open up our survey to everybody who had an engineering degree who was interested in having their voices heard. So this is how we approached this study in terms of first going the very rigorous design and then finding that it was creating a lot of heartburn for people who really wanted their contributions to be known through participating in the survey and letting them also get their voices heard. So you can get a little bit of a sneak peek in terms of how we went about it. We have more information in the report. We did not quite expect the numbers to turn out the way they did, but what was going on is that a big chunk of women who had graduated, who had gotten their undergraduate degrees in engineering from some of these colleges, chose not to enter the engineering profession. They chose to go to some other places, and I'll talk a little bit about in terms of the reasons why and where they went. So that's about 14%. We had two more groups of what we call the non-persisters, women who left 5 years ago, and I'll tell you the reason why we use the 5-year cutoff, and the women who left less than 5 years ago. And these are 32% put together. The reason we used the 5-year cutoff was because research has shown that after 5 years, when we ask people to go back and recollect and see what their work experiences have been like, they usually tend to have biases in their recollection. So we decided to use 5 years as a cutoff and asked women to report back on their work experiences, things that went well, things did not go well, a huge number of questions that we had asked them about. And women who left less than 5 years ago were given the full survey. Women who left more than 5 years ago were given a very condensed, abbreviated, short and sweet survey, which talked about some of the important things, but not quite as detailed as the ones who were currently working in engineering, so that we could compare them with the recent departees, so to say. So you have about 46%. We have played around with the numbers, so excuse me if I've gotten that wrong. It is 46 and 54%. And 54% of the women who have decided to continue on in engineering. This is the divide, roughly 50-50%. It's important to figure out, before we talk about why women are leaving, to first take a look at why women are not even considering entering engineering. And I wanted to kind of label this a tip of the hat to Dr. Larry Summers. It's not because of some of the things that he talked about, but really because they were not interested, having seen what was going on in the labs, in their internships, in the co-ops. What they told us was the reason they were not interested in entering the engineering profession is because they did not want to do the things that they've already been exposed to a little bit. They had a little sneak peek at the engineering culture. They were lowballed during initial job offers compared to their male colleagues. Low salary expectations. They didn't find that this is the path for them to go ahead and make a difference, so they chose not to enter the engineering profession and went on to do something else. And as you can see, there were no differences across different age groups or years of graduation, which was quite a bit of a surprise. So most of them are currently working, and a very small sliver, about 8%, are not working and engaged in what we call family care. Could be elder care or could be child care responsibilities, but some kind of caregiving responsibilities. Now, among the two groups of women who left engineering, we have those who left more than 5 years ago, and those are the ones that I'd like to first talk about, and some of the reasons why they left engineering. Again, you can see there's a little bit of a theme here. Which will make a bit of a change when we talk about the group who left less than 5 years ago. Very small segment of this population has left because of caregiving reasons of one kind or the other. Many of them are going to be reported that they're currently working, and they're leaving for opportunities for advancement, for making a difference, for growth, for learning. And a few of them said that when they were working in project teams where they could not feel that they were making a difference, that made them lose interest in engineering. So there was a recurrent theme there: lack of advancement, lack of opportunities for making a difference, lack of training to continue contributing, and family care was only one small part of this whole reasons for departure. We chose some representational quotes from our women participants to kind of capture their experiences much better than what we could have done it in our academic language. And this is a quote from a Caucasian chemical engineering graduate who said, to advance, it seems as though you must be willing and able to work more than 50 hours a week and be on call 24/7. So what are these women doing who have left more than 5 years ago? Over 2/3 of them are working. Actually, this is a different group, left over 5 years ago. Most of them are working. This slide should have gone with the other one, with the less than 5 years ago, so I'll come back to that. A third of the women have left because of caregiving responsibilities, but 2/3 of them have left for opportunities for advancement and growth. And this is a very interesting comment made by one of the participants, and it kind of puts everything together in one box. You can see there's discrimination, boys network, glass ceiling, and what was most fascinating, if we knew the name of this person, we could have followed up with over email and said, what do you mean by this white Midwestern men syndrome? Because she had typed it out in caps. So something in her experience made it stand out, but we thought this was really powerful in capturing some of the feelings that women had in working in this engineering workplaces. And this is another fascinating comment that captures their experiences and the reasons for the departure. They feel they're all out on their own trying to make a difference. And this is another comment. Leadership funnels that are very, very narrow and maybe even filtered in terms of having different standards. We don't know that. So why do women leave? It's not because they lack self-confidence. It's not because they do not have the requisite training or interest to pursue their passion in engineering. It's not entirely because of caregiving responsibilities, whether it's elder care or child care. Some of them do leave, but majority of them are continuing on in engineering, and they want to make a difference. So this is the profile of women who are currently working in engineering. They have been in the field for about 8 years in the current engineering profession. Mid-level to slightly above mid-level have responsibilities. You can see the salary, average salary that they are making. And maybe this is the point where I should hit the board, since we all come from academic environment, a lot of our speakers. So the way we kind of, I was looking at it in terms of, we talk about the pipeline issue here, right? You have the K-12 system. We have the same problem of markers not quite working. We have the K-12 system that's putting in all the time and energy and interventions to try to focus our efforts here. And we have a cool 14% who are not even entering the pipeline. This is your organizational professional pipeline. We are losing out so many people along the way. And to give you the kind of the punchline, women leave after about, on an average, about 10 years into the profession, they start thinking about leaving engineering. So this is the leaky pipeline. First, we have hemorrhaging over here at the start of the career, and then we have hemorrhaging all down the line. And the reason why they stay on, they have not left the pipeline, is because of some of the things that would be what we call not really new ideas. It's the kind of messages that our speakers have spoken throughout yesterday's session and today's sessions. They are working in workplaces, companies, cultures, organizations, institutions where people get it. There's a sense of balance, they have the support, their systems in place to help them make a difference, have an impact. They feel satisfied with their work, they feel satisfied with their careers. But women, also from what our data is telling us, are also a flight risk. The women who are still in the pipeline, a lot of them did exhibit a lot of angst. They reported feelings of unhappiness. And given where we are with the economy currently, a lot of them are just biding the time to leave. And what are some of the reasons why they are not feeling a sense of satisfaction and feeling a sense of growth within the companies? Because they have a lot of workload without enough resources. And it's not because they are not able to work hard. It's because they have been given too much that they can handle compared to some of their male counterparts. And we have some data on that, not the males, but the reporting of, to whatever extent that is accurate. A lot of them have reported that they've hit a career plateau. And that's causing them this reason to try to look for different opportunities for growth. Just like in physical sciences, natural sciences, you have a picture that goes along with a cell, or in the morning we had beautiful pictures of the ovaries. This is the picture of what a hostile, chilly climate looks like for women engineers. It has a name, it has a face, hostility and undermining. We asked for behaviors, not just perceptions of those behaviors, but behaviors in terms of what it is that you felt was unpleasant in this work environment. And women reported being belittled, humiliated, talked down to in a condescending manner, in a patronizing manner, being made to feel incompetent, information was not given to them, and all attempts were made to help them from not succeeding at work. Just the opposite of the wonderful supportive environment that our speakers in the morning session have spoken about so far. So this is a very active. This is what a chilly climate looks like. There are behaviors that went on along with these chilly climate kind of experiences. The other thing that keeps women from considering staying on in engineering is the climate that hinders them from juggling. We all heard from our previous speaker, do not wait till you are at the cusp of late reproductive period, but have kids when you are at your peak reproductive period, right? So what are the companies doing to make it easier for us? You can see a lot of the companies, the motto for success, career success is really still defined by face time, working 50 plus hours. And just having daycare, just having those some kind of flexible arrangements are not really going to cut it unless you have a culture that supports those kind of changes. There's another stream of research that shows that women are more likely to take advantage of some of these work-life policies, but they're penalized for taking advantage of those policies because they happen to be working in organizations that are not supportive of work-life balance. So you are penalized if you do want to take advantage of those things. So it really comes down to having a hostile climate manifested in many, many different ways, unsupportive colleagues and supervisors, and different types of barriers in the work environment. And this is the final set of quotes that I'm going to show you, but it really captures how we have different standards for dealing with female talent and male talent. Whether it's in STEM, whether it's any kind of workplaces. If we put our minds together and try to look at it in a way that makes a difference for everybody, women are going to benefit as well. It's because we use different standards for women that we have some of the problems that we are encountering. So one of the biggest ideas, or biggest things that we found in our study was the fact that when we talk about this leaky pipeline, when women are leaving the organization, they're leaving the profession. They're not like doctors who are changing from one practice to the other practice, or lawyers who are going to another practice. They are done. They're done with engineering. They may stay an engineer at heart, but they're leaving the profession for good. So we're talking about attrition from the profession at the same breath as we're talking about attrition from the organization. So we're hemorrhaging the profession, really. And some of the things that, what we recommend, some thought pieces to start the change going on, is to first look at women's turnover not as being a women's issue at all. It is not a women's problem. There's enough that women are carrying on the shoulders in terms of trying to make a difference and trying to carve a path for themselves and soldiering on their own. But this is not a women's problem. And the sooner we take the lens off that, or put on a different lens and start looking at as a corporate problem, as an institutional problem, as a system-wide problem, we can put things in place to make a difference in women's lives and careers, and we all stand to benefit. One of the things that people ask us is that, when you recommend some of those things, does it mean that it's only for women? And our answer is always the same. These are best practices for everybody. If you apply it to everybody, we will not have this kind of issues and challenges, dilemmas that we're facing. It's not something just we're asking exclusively for women. Women do not have special needs. They want the same thing as men do, which is advancement and respect. And when they don't get that, they bide their time till they get to a place where they can get some of those things. So it really, in those sense, are not novel ideas. It's just we have some numbers to back up what we've been talking about. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this conversation, and happy to take questions.
To our three speakers, if we can have everybody come up, don't run away, and use the microphones at the table. We will now take questions.
I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for the last speaker, Romila, did fantastic work illustrating some of the challenges. And the reason I'm saying this is because I was starting to become a little uneasy throughout the conference as I heard these wonderful stories, and I really admire every one single speaker that spoke yesterday and today for their wonderful career paths. But my concern, but what it would have left me if we didn't have this last presentation was that it's really upon us and us alone to succeed in our careers. While in reality, we all know that it's a partnership that is made of very talented people and smart people together with talented and smart organizations that enable these people to flourish and enable more people like these to succeed in their work environment. And so I was wondering whether anyone had some comments to make about this. And particularly, I would like to know what is happening that is actually taking the knowledge that Romila has shown us and turning them into reality and into really actions that actually are changing the climate, the bias, and ultimately the number of talented women who make it through the engineering and STEM careers. Thanks.
I think anybody can answer that question. We have had exemplars throughout the day. Baxter, Abbott, they are the ones who are making the conversation. They are actually making a difference. They have changed the culture. I was making notes when Andrea Hunt was speaking about Baxter, and I forget the name of the speaker about Abbott. They have put in play. They have put in the pieces that make this work for men and women. It's not just all about women. It's about making sure that it's a place that is inclusive for everybody from different backgrounds and who can thrive and innovate and be creative and brings out the best potential. And if it's not the kind of an environment for people who like the status quo, they can leave for other places. This is a growing place. And I think they have the cultures in place to make it happen. And I think what the comments illustrated was that it took them a while to get to that place, from realization to making it work. So it's not something that it can happen overnight.
Hi, my question is also for Dr. Singh. I was just wondering, in your study of why women leave or why women are more satisfied with their engineering jobs, were you able to characterize what traits of these companies where women tend to be more satisfied? Like, are they bigger or smaller companies, newer, older, or geographical locations such that women engineers can try to look for those when they're looking, for a job?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have not done such a deep dive into the data as yet to look at the big and small company differences, but what we did find were the systems were in place. There were systems for training and professional development, so that when we talk about giving these opportunities for advancement and growth, and a number of our speakers today talked about how they were picked for assignments, or they were giving the stretch assignments to develop the skills. Those are the kind of things that we did investigate. Training and development, promotion systems that were fair, transparent, and accessible to men and women, criteria that were transparent and were readily were known to everybody, what the criteria for promotion and advancement were. There was just fairness and transparency in an organization that showed it supported women at every level, from the overall in terms of we care about the well-being and concern about women, recognizing the accomplishments, to having the training, development, promotion systems, the ladder systems in place to make it happen. And we did look at the personal side as a little bit, but not in terms of the traits, just in terms of, I know this is not what your question was, but sometimes it happens that, is it because women have certain personality traits that helps them succeed? And we looked at the confidence, and that's what the data we reported on. Women did not differ in the confidence levels. In three things we looked at: engineering tasks, whether they had the confidence and competence to do engineering, whether they had the confidence to navigate the organizational life, the political life, knowing whom to work with, whom to connect, whom to leave out, how to network through all these situations. And also their competence, the confidence in managing multiple life roles, again, things that our speakers have spoken about. And there were no differences among women who left and women who stayed. So it's not really their personality that we need to try to change, but the overall the system that needs some kind of looking into.
My question is for the first speaker. There's been a lot of media attention recently about the political climate changing in regards to women's health and birth control. How has that affected the focus of your research, if any, and the people that you deal with? Like, have there been a lot of just changes recently?
That's a great question. Initially, it can be really disheartening, but I think the first is, it's one of the reasons why I added a policy program to my work, because even the funding available from NIH is affected by the political climate. I had to be very technical, I had a grant. I went through the study section. I scored incredibly well, but it was considered a controversial topic, and I didn't get funded. And I thought, oh my gosh, out of 80 grants, I got in the top percentile and didn't get funded. So my work is very political, even when I'm trying not to be political. So it's really a difficult part. The flip side is that when there are attacks on women, other people are also mobilized by that. So I actually use a very diverse funding strategy for my work, because I can't always rely on traditional funding sources. So you'll find that sometimes individuals and foundations also get excited about what you do. So I try to use it to my advantage, but I think it's one of the reasons why having a broader framework, really thinking about sexual and reproductive health in the context of both the biologic factors as well as youth development, as well as the social and political, I think we're able to appeal to a broad number of interests, and I think that helps sustain it.
I had a question for our second speaker today. Knowing now that there is a difference in the cognitive or memory function depending on your age or even week to week within your cycle, do you have any tips or suggestions?
We were talking about this at lunch. So I'm sure that it'll be interesting when you go home, if you're still cycling. I think you'll be able to tell when you're ovulating. That's when the differences are most evident. That's when your fluency is highest, your verbal abilities are key. I think what it offers us is much more flexibility in what we can do cognitively. So if you're in a high estrogen level and your fine motor skills are peaking, go ahead and do your surgery, assemble that machine, do whatever it is that your lab has you do. And it's not because you have small fingers, ladies. It's because you have better skills in putting things together in personal space. Just enjoy the flexibility of it. The differences in these tests are about 1/3 of a standard deviation. So they can be considerable, actually. So they should have an influence on your daily functioning. But yeah, I just enjoy the ride. And during the perimenopausal transition, just, ride it out.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, this is a question for Dr. Maki, but also Melissa might be interested in it too. So given all these things that we know now about the estrogen and the neural effects, the cortisol, the memory, and the spatial aspects of it, is there one more? Probably most of the people in this room are actually not ovulating, and it's not because they're in menopause.
They're on oral contraceptives.
It's because they're on contraceptives of some sort or another.
Yep.
That affect their estrogen. Has anyone looked at that? And
Yeah, we have. Yeah, so because we like looking at these things. So we did a study where we compared verbal memory in naturally cycling women and verbal memory in women on oral contraceptives, where we tested women who were on oral contraceptives during their dummy pills and during their active pills. And when they were on their active pills, their verbal memory was enhanced. So it's just like the majority of my work focuses on whether women should take estrogen during the menopausal transition, whether it'll benefit her brain. In our clinical trials show that estrogen alone is very beneficial for her memory functioning, but when you add certain progestins, it antagonizes estrogen in the hippocampus and thereby decreases the verbal memory. So we need to get a progestin that helps women to protect their uterus and maintain their memory. But for the oral contraceptives bit, it should enhance verbal memory. That's what our work shows within the same woman, tested at 2 time points, and the mood changes don't explain it, nor do menstrual symptoms. So it's surprising and almost mind-blowing. If you're bored some night, do a PubMed search on oral contraceptives and cognition. And the pool of data is really small. Larry Cahill, my buddy, he published a study showing that when women are on oral contraceptives, they get the gist of a story better. When women are on estrogen, they get the details of a study better. So there are these of a story better. So there are very subtle effects on the way that we process information depending on our sex steroid hormonal milieu. But we know surprisingly little about oral contraceptives. I think I probably told you what the field knows so far.
So they haven't looked at the cortisol link that much, huh?
Oh, we have, yeah. So we have.
Because that could be the negative
It's controversial. So the data are discrepant. We have and the Germans have. And our data don't agree with the Germans. So our data shows that the women on the oral contraceptives are having more of a cortisol surge. And it's not differentially affecting their memory more than naturally cycling women, but the oral contraceptives, those who are on their active pills, are having more of a cortisol surge. We serve a different group of women than the people at Trier who do this, the stress paradigm. They're mostly 98% Caucasian, middle class, and we serve Chicago. We have a very diverse group. So one of the things that we're focusing on now, which is completely rational given the field of psychiatry and what it's found about stress, is that women who have early life stressors, their stress system responds. One hypothesis that we have is that estrogen will kick in to women and be protective against surges in stress in women who have a background of high stress exposure and trauma. So that's one possibility, but this is how much the field is in its infancy right now.
Great. And we'll take one more very quick question, and the rest we can talk offline because we've got a break coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, so I have a question for the last speaker. I've read some stuff about why women leave the workplace. One of the ideas I kind of liked, so it stuck with me, was this idea that women might not take more challenging positions or roles because they anticipate that 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, maybe they won't want those roles because they'll want to be with their family. So when they get to that point 5 or 10 years down the road, then they're more likely to leave because they're not in a challenging position. So have you seen that at all?
Well, it's just been the opposite, and that was the part that really surprised us. And this is just the first phase of the data we are reporting. We have started the second phase, and we are going to follow this women longitudinally because there's nothing like longitudinal data, right? And social scientists are not known for that, so we're kind of breaking out of that mold and looking at women longitudinally, following them from year to year for 3 years and seeing how the pattern changes. But from what we have seen so far, from the written comments, from the data, they are frustrated that they are not given those stretch assignments, that they are not being picked for those key roles. And one theme that came out again and again, I want to make a difference. I want to be in a strategic management position. I want to be in strategic leadership position. I want to do things that make a difference. And when I was not given that opportunity, and my male colleagues who had less tenure, who were less competent, who had less accomplishments were given that opportunity, I decided I had to leave. So those were from the women who have left, and a comparable response was from women who are still staying on. I was given those opportunities. I had supportive mentors, I had supportive colleagues and bosses who gave me those challenging assignments. We did not come up that low aspirations, which has been the theme in some of the other places, which was quite a bit of a surprise to us, that women are not pulling back. In fact, they want to give out more, and then they're hitting a wall.
Great. So thank you to our panel. So we've just got one quick announcement, and then we've got a short break, and for everyone to get back in here at 3:30 so that we stay on track. Hold on one sec.
20 seconds. So Jessica, can you identify yourself? Here she is. Jessica, she's a AAAS fellow working as a guest blogger for Scientific American. She'll be standing outside this door. She wants to ask anybody who's interested, she's recording, what's the craziest thing you've ever done in the name of science? So if you want to answer that, Jessica will be outside waiting for you. We have about 12 minutes.